Hey friends, I've got a cool, quick little video to show you that I think is going to have a huge impact on the way that you mix vocals. My philosophy on mixing vocals is that you've got to have three main components. Now, hopefully, you've got a good recording, or at least a decent one. That's why I'm going to show you, I've got a home recording here. All of the tracks here were done in a spare bedroom. That's right. A drum kit was put in a walk-in closet. But today we're just going to be focusing on the vocals. This was recorded with a very basic Rode NT1 and yeah, nothing special as far as mic pre's. I believe this was recorded through a Personas mic pre. Very basic, very common type of things that we see in our home studio environments. But I want to show you how you can take these three vocal mixing components and get a really good sounding vocal, one that you can be proud of, one that you're going to want to put on all of the streaming platforms and start building your career around. Now, I like to use these plugins right here for the three vocal mixing components, but I'm going to show you how you can get just as good of a sound with your stock plugins. And today, my DAW of choice is Pro Tools. And I like using Pro Tools when I showcase stock plugins because I feel like it's the one that really has the least amount of plugins that you can kind of compare things to. So I sorry Pro Tools, but I don't think that we have advanced enough in our stock plugins to really compete with some of the other ones like Logic or Studio One. But that's why I'm using this to show you just how simple this really is. Just letting you know that you have these tools available. Now, the way that I like to set this up is to have everything running through all of the vocals, all the lead vocals, and going through three different buses here. I'm not using a send. I've got the output so that it's all going there as much as I send it with the fader. So the output of the audio track here is going to be sent to these bus tracks. And I've just pushed the faders up a little bit because this is a typical view, typical settings of how these will blend nicely together. Now, that's not to say that this is the exact, because remember, there are no exact settings that you can use on every single mix, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. So, but this kind of looks like it. This kind of looks like it may look like this a little bit, pushed up, whatever. But this is sort of the general area that these three will kind of look like. Because you don't want as much of the mic pre-saturation as you would of the heavy compression. Okay, so that's how you set that up. And then all three of these are going to a group track, which I'll get to in just a second. But just keep in mind, all of the plugins on that are bypassed as well. So you're just getting a little bit of the vocal effects, I guess. All right, so let's just take a listen to see what that sounds like.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in.
So it doesn't sound terribly bad. It's a little nasally right now. And a lot of times when we first get the mix or we first get to that mixing stage, we want to take a EQ and we want to go in and sweep all through there and pull out just a handful or even more, two handfuls of frequencies, because we saw people do that in the mid 2000s to, I don't know, probably somewhere around 2012 of somebody doing that. And those videos just went viral and people started making more videos of doing the same thing. But I can promise you this, that is not how mix engineers who have mixed songs that you are referencing, who mix songs that you are hearing on the radio, on all your favorite streaming devices. That is not how you mix vocals. So keep that in mind on how it sounds now. We're not even going to grab an EQ. You don't even see an EQ on here. So the first thing that I want to do is find something that's going to work like this Fatso that I have on here, because these are the plugins that I'll usually go with. But today's lesson is to show you how you can achieve these things using your DAW's stock plugins. So I know that the Fatso, what is that offering me? Well, by doing a quick Google search, I can see that the Fatso has got some tapes and tubes saturation in there. It's also got some compression, pretty heavy compression. It's said that it's got an 1176 style compressor. So I'm going to take that information and I'm going to go through my stock plugins and see if I can come up with something, because there's a few components working in the Fatso. So I'm probably going to have to find a couple of plugins to have a combination to get that end result that I'm looking for. So we need to find some sort of tape, some sort of saturation in that department. Okay, so Pro Tools looks like it has this real tape saturation. All right, so I want to do a little bit of drive with that, right? Maybe a little bit, maybe a little more output. I think we'll be okay at 15 IPS. That's going to give it kind of that medium, not too bright, not too dark of sound. So 15 is good. I like that on tape. There's a couple options here. You can kind of go through these things, right? Because what you're trying to do is just add a little bit of warmth, add some weight to the vocal. It's going to hold a lot nicer in the rest of the mix with this. And then that added compression that we're going to put on in just a second, we'll keep it there, keep that setting that we've created. So let's see what this sounds like.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in.
So right off the bat, I hope you notice this. If not, we'll do it again. But just listen. It almost sounds like the real kind of sharp transients that get away have now been smoothed out. So listen kind of on that top end, kind of if you've got headphones on, just listen very carefully to how far away those transients go, and then where they're just tucked in a little bit better, kind of smoothed off, polished a little bit. So check that out.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in.
And it has added some warmth already to the vocal, and it centered it. It has centered the vocal even more by just doing this. So now let's go through and find that 1176 style that comes with Pro Tools here.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in. Something different about this woman, though you know her breath, it didn't smell so sweet. I was starving for some attention, though, and she offered me some to eat.
All right, so immediately you can tell that we've added some volume on that. That's okay, because we're trying to wake up the vocal. We're trying to push it out and have all the other elements work around it. I mean, that's what we're doing with the vocal here. All right, so I think that's a pretty good place to stop. We may have to go back and tweak these, because we're trying to combine some stock plugins to sound like these, pretty premium, expensive plugins. All right, so the next thing up is our vocal saturation. That's the next thing that I believe every vocal has to have. So the way that I like to achieve vocal saturation is from a mic pre plugin. Of course, if you've got the real thing, go for that as well. But there's not really anything here that's just like a mic pre or a hardware emulation channel strip with a mic pre on there. So the next thing in line here I see is the Sans amp, because I know that's got a preamp here. So we're going to use this, see what happens. Probably don't need that much crunch or drive, but let's crank this up.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in. Something different about this woman, though you know her breath, it didn't smell so sweet. I was starving for some attention, though, and she offered me some to eat.
Isn't that neat? So when I put this plug-in in, we've got that preamp cranked up. And if we needed to, we could back off the level a little bit. I know that's kind of how I do the Neve 1073 here. So I'll crank that up, but I'll pull the output of the sound down.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in.
Just gives it that little extra professional sound. There's just something really nice about that.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in.
So the way that I like to describe what the vocal saturation component is doing is that if you were to paint some old furniture or, some sort of piece of wood or something like that, or even, even metal, you have to sand it down. And you're not just removing any sort of previous coating or previous paint on that. You're sanding it so that the paint or a finish or whatever you're applying can stick the best to that piece that you're painting. And that's how I see the vocal saturation component, is because we're kind of putting a little bit of grit so that all of this stuff, all of this music around it attaches itself to the vocal. It's able to come through, but also sound like one complementary track. And so that's how I like to look at the vocal saturation component. Now, the last thing here is our heavy compression, and what better compressor to use than the 1176. So let's grab that again. And what I'm looking for here is some heavy compression. I want to get 10 dBs worth of compression here.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in.
That sounds great. Now in this, you can adjust the output of that.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in. Something different about this woman, though you know her breath, it didn't smell so sweet.
That's what's going to push the vocal to sit just on top, just barely on top, so that we have our center anchor of our vocal, all the other elements, our drums, our guitars, our bass, any other things that you've got going on, is sort of just letting that vocal sit just on top of those so that it sounds as the present centered audio. Let's take a listen and see how all that works together.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in. Something different about this woman, though you know her breath, it didn't smell so sweet. I was starving for some attention, though, and she offered me some to eat. Took me up the stairs to her room above the bar. Oh, this woman and her ways.
So when we take them out, we get a pretty nasally sounding vocal. Pretty thin sounding vocal. Just very amateurish sounding vocal. But let's bring back in all of these components and compare that.
I met her on the dark side of some bar in which I'd never been. The neon flashing signs invited me on in. Something different about this woman, though you know her breath, it didn't smell so sweet. I was starving for some attention, though, and she offered me some to eat.
So now you have a clear, present, warm, rich, out front vocal. Doesn't sound thin anymore. Doesn't sound like we have to go and pull out something nasally, because that's where we go wrong. We hear a thinner vocal and we think it sounds nasally. So we go in, sweep for all those frequencies that we've boosted 12 dB. Of course, they're going to sound bad, but we pull them out, pull out about 7 of them. And what have we done? We've only made a thin sounding vocal sound even more thin. And then you get all backed up because you probably mixed the vocals last. And now that's what you've done, you're not going to connect to the mix anymore. You are going to start tweaking all of the instruments, and then you've got a big mess that it's going to be so hard to undo, to get out of, and that you're going to have to wipe the mix and start all over. So instead of having to go through that headache, put your vocals through these 3 vocal mixing components. That's a vocal warmth, vocal saturation, and then heavy vocal compression. I promise this will help you out so much more than going through an EQ. And like I said, these are all going through a vocal group here, but I have nothing done. And, you know, when I had the original plugins on there, it was very minimal stuff. The only thing that was taken out is this dynamic frequency. And that's only when it hits a certain spot. And really, look what it says. It's only going down 0.6 dB. It's just compressing 0.6 dB down when it hits over that threshold. On this one, the only thing that I've got here, a tad bit of air. That's 1.2 dBs, about 2, and that's it. No cuts on that. A little de-essing, you know, some other things that are going on here. A lot of these haven't been quite tweaked yet, but if this is something that you would like to get into, like to know a little bit more about my vocal process, I've got a vocal mixing course called the Modern Mix Vocals. I have that available on my website. I'll leave anyone interested in that. I'll leave a link down in the description. And I'd like to know who all is here. So if you are familiar with this style of vocal mixing, let me know. Go ahead and leave me a little fader icon. And if you're here to observe and to learn more about this style of mixing, to learn more about how you can utilize your stock plugins to get professional sounding vocals, leave me the headphone emoji there. And so I can see who all is here, what we need to work on. And if you would like to have a more in-depth vocal mixing course at your fingertips, I've got that available. I'll leave it in the description. I'll leave a link for that for you to go straight to, read about it, read about my vocal mixing process. And I go over all of these other things. I've got, I think, 4 different songs in there to mix from. I've got 4 multi-tracks for you to practice on. And I go real in depth on a few different styles of music, right? I've got rap and hip hop. I've got rock. I've got some more country style in there. So all across the board, this is what I do every single time, no matter what the style of music, no matter what the style of vocal is, genre, doesn't matter. These are the things that is going to set you apart from that thin, amateurish home recording sound to a professional, polished, commercial ready, competing vocal that you can have and be proud of. Just these 3 components. Now you know the why, you understand why we need these, and you also know how you can achieve this by using just the plugins that come with your DAW. All right, y'all, if you have any questions that you'd like answered about this, or if you've got some questions about the vocal mixing course, go ahead, just leave them in the description, or you can email me directly, emily@fairairmusic.com, and I'll be sure to answer you. If I don't answer right off the bat, it's just because I haven't gotten to yours yet. I get quite a few daily, and I only have a little window of time to answer those. So anyways, thank you so much for checking this video out. And if you haven't got any questions, just hit me up. All right, I will see y'all in the next one.